The world's first set of surviving septuplets are turning 28 years old today.
The world's first set of surviving septuplets are turning 28 years old today. These are babies, and how can you decide that you're going to have this one and you're not going to have that one? How do you choose which one? In 1997, a 29-year-old woman from a small Iowa town walked into a hospital with 7 heartbeats inside her. And her doctors begged her, not asked, begged her to terminate some of them before she killed herself trying to carry them all. Her name was Bobby McCaughey. What she said next that afternoon split a nation, defied every medical expert in America, and rewrote the record books in a way nobody had ever seen before. We're going to do everything that we can that's within our power to make sure that they're born healthy. Now, almost 3 decades later, the 7 faces tied to that one impossible decision are all grown up. And what they look like today might genuinely shock you. The diagnosis. So here's the backstory. Before any of this, Bobby McCaughey was a young mom in Carroll, Iowa, a town of barely 4,000 people. Kenny worked as a billing clerk at a local auto body shop. They had one daughter already, Michaela. And for years, they had been quietly trying for a second. Nothing happened. Eventually, the doctors gave it a name, polycystic ovary syndrome. Bobby's ovaries weren't releasing eggs properly. For a couple desperate to grow their family, it's one of the worst sentences you can hear. So, they tried medicine, a fertility drug called Metrodin, a hormone-based injection designed to trigger ovulation. In the beginning, we had tried to be careful and plan because we knew that, something bigger and better is going to come along. The doctor warned them about multiples. Twins, maybe triplets if they were unlucky. Nobody, not the doctor, not the nurse, not the pharmacist who handed over the prescription, ever said the word 7 out loud. Then came the first ultrasound. The technician moved the wand across Bobby's stomach and went silent. Then she started counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. She kept going. By the time she stopped, Bobby was holding her breath, so hard her chest hurt. 7 heartbeats. The technician left the room to get a doctor. The doctor came in, looked at the screen, looked at Bobby, and didn't say anything for a long time. There was no script for this. There had never been a script for this. Bobby went home that night, sat at her kitchen table across from Kenny, and tried to find the words. She didn't have to. Within 48 hours, the hospital called them back in. Bobby was about to find out why. The conference room at Iowa Methodist is small. Beige walls, a long table, a box of tissues sitting in the middle. Like the doctors already know how this conversation is going to end. 3 specialists sit on one side. Bobby and Kenny sit on the other. If you can establish that early and just maintain it, your kids will be happier, and you will be happier. Bobby is 29 years old. She is 3 months pregnant with 7 babies. She has not slept properly in days. The lead doctor starts gently. He explains what the human body is designed to do and what it is not. A woman's uterus can stretch to hold 1 baby, sometimes 2, occasionally 3. It is not built for 7. Bobby's heart will be forced to pump blood for 8 people. Her kidneys will work overtime. Her lungs will get crushed against her rib cage as the babies grow. Her blood pressure will likely spike to dangerous levels. She could stroke. She could hemorrhage. She could die on the delivery table. And the babies, the doctor doesn't soften it. Most of them won't survive. Carried to term, 7 fetuses in one womb is a death sentence for at least some. Probably most. They'll be born too small. Their lungs won't be ready. Their brains won't be ready. The ones who live will face a lifetime of complications. The ones who don't will die in their incubators in the first days of life. Then the doctor offers the way out. Selective reduction, a medical procedure where physicians terminate some of the fetuses in the womb to give the remaining ones a real chance. He recommends bringing the number down to 2, maybe 3 at the very most. It is, he says carefully, the responsible choice. It is what the medical literature supports. It is what almost every doctor in the country would advise. The decision room. The conference room at Iowa Methodist is small. Beige walls, a long table, a box of tissues sitting in the middle. Like the doctors already know how this conversation is going to end. 3 specialists sit on one side. Bobby and Kenny sit on the other. Bobby is 29 years old. She is 3 months pregnant with 7 babies. She has not slept properly in days. The lead doctor starts gently. He explains what the human body is designed to do and what it is not. A woman's uterus can stretch to hold one baby, sometimes two, occasionally three. It is not built for 7. Bobby's heart will be forced to pump blood for 8 people. Her kidneys will work overtime. Her lungs will get crushed against her rib cage as the babies grow. Her blood pressure will likely spike to dangerous levels. She could stroke. She could hemorrhage. She could die on the delivery table. And the babies, the doctor doesn't soften it. Most of them won't survive. Carried to term 7 fetuses in one womb is a death sentence for at least some, probably most. They'll be born too small. Their lungs won't be ready. Their brains won't be ready. The ones who live will face a lifetime of complications. The ones who don't will die in their incubators in the first days of life. Then the doctor offers the way out. Selective reduction, a medical procedure where physicians terminate some of the fetuses in the womb to give the remaining ones a real chance. He recommends bringing the number down to 2, maybe 3 at the very most. It is, he says carefully, the responsible choice. It is what the medical literature supports. It is what almost every doctor in the country would advise. Bobby doesn't say anything. Kenny squeezes her hand under the table. She can feel his wedding ring against her knuckles. The doctor keeps talking. He explains the timeline. He explains the procedure itself. He explains how Bobby can be home the same day, recovering with 2 healthy heartbeats still growing inside her instead of 7 that probably won't make it. He uses words like manageable, realistic, compassionate. Bobby looks down at her stomach. She thinks about her faith. She thinks about her pastor. She thinks about Michaela at home with her grandparents, 3 years old, waiting to find out how many brothers and sisters she's getting. She thinks about the fact that somebody at this table is asking her to choose which of her babies gets to live. And here's where it gets crazy. Because for a long moment in that conference room, Bobby McCaughey, a soft-spoken Baptist mom from a town most Americans had never heard of, just sits there. She doesn't cry. She doesn't argue. She doesn't ask questions. She just stares at the table. Then she looks up at the lead doctor. She looks at Kenny. She looks back at the doctor. She says no. The room goes quiet. The doctor tries again. He walks her through the risks one more time, slower this time, like she didn't hear him correctly. He warns her she could lose all of them, every last heartbeat, including her own. Bobby looks at Kenny. Kenny nods. She says no again. Yes, 'cause I really want us to be, as normal of a family as we could be. That's the best way to raise a family is just with the normal every day, That single word repeated twice in a beige conference room in Des Moines, Iowa on a Tuesday afternoon in 1997 is the moment this entire story turns. Everything that comes after the headlines, the survival, the 7 adults living 7 different lives today, all of it traces back to that number. Now listen, before we go any further, if you're already invested in this story, do me a quick favor and hit subscribe and ring the bell. We tell stories like this every week. And you're not going to want to miss what's coming because the choice Bobby just made, surviving the decision, was the easy part. The longest 4 months, the McCaughey's went public almost immediately because there was no way to hide what was happening. Word leaked from the hospital. Reporters started calling. Talk show hosts began debating their refusal on national television. Strangers wrote letters, some full of prayers, others full of warnings that Bobby was being selfish, irresponsible, dangerous. Pastors mentioned the family from the pulpit. Medical ethicists wrote opinion pieces in newspapers. 2 complete strangers, total opposites of each other. Both claimed to know what was best for the babies inside Bobby's body. But the loudest voices weren't in their living room. They were inside Bobby's own body. She spent the final 4 months of the pregnancy on strict bed rest. She couldn't stand for more than a few minutes at a time. She couldn't roll over without help. She gained close to 70 pounds. Doctors compared the load on her body to carrying a full-term singleton 5 times over simultaneously. Every breath was a project. Every meal was timed and measured. Volunteers from her church came to the house in shifts just to help her sit up, just to bring her water, just to keep her company while Kenny was at work. There were nights when Bobby laid in bed and felt all 7 babies moving at once. 7 separate sets of kicks, 7 separate rhythms, all happening inside her at the same time. She had no idea how to process that. Nobody did. There was no book for this. There was no support group. There was no other mother she could call and ask, "Hey, what does it feel like at month 7? She was the first. And get this, through all of it, every weekly ultrasound, every check-in, every appointment where the doctors expected to deliver bad news, the babies kept growing. All 7 of them stubbornly together. Then came November 19th, 1997. Iowa Methodist Medical Center cleared an entire wing. More than 40 doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, and neonatal specialists were on standby. 7 separate incubators were lined up and waiting. The hallways were quiet. Outside, news vans had already started parking in the lot. Cameras lined the curb. Reporters from networks around the world had flown in for the chance to be there when it happened. The delivery itself took less than 7 minutes. 7 minutes. 7 babies, one after another, lifted out of Bobby and handed off to 7 separate teams. Each baby weighed less than 3 pounds. Some weighed barely over 2. They were so small that, as one nurse later described it, you could hold one in the palm of your hand and your fingers would close completely around them. And then, one by one, the room filled with sound. 7 separate cries. Bobby, lying flat on the operating table, exhausted, swollen, half-conscious from the anesthesia, heard each one. Kenny was at her side. Neither of them said anything. They just listened. 7 cries in a row in a hospital in Des Moines, Iowa, where a few months earlier, 3 doctors had sat across a beige table and told her this exact outcome was almost impossible. She had been right. But what those 7 cries were the start of, nobody, not Bobby, not Kenny, not the doctors, not the news crews now sprinting across the parking lot was prepared for. The names came first. Kenneth Robert Jr., Alexis May, Natalie Sue, Kelsey and Nathan Roy, Brandon James, Joel Stephen. 7 names written on 7 little hospital bracelets, each one barely big enough to fit around a wrist the size of a quarter. Then the real fight started. The neonatal intensive care unit looked like something out of a science fiction film. 7 clear plastic incubators arranged in a row, each one humming with the sound of monitors and ventilators and feeding pumps. Tubes ran in and out of every direction. Lights blinked. Alarms went off constantly. Nurses moved from incubator to incubator 24 hours a day. Every time a heart rate dipped, every time an oxygen level dropped, the room reacted instantly. Bobby couldn't hold any of them at first. They were too fragile. One night, a few days after the birth, she stood beside the incubator holding Alexis. Just stood there. She put her hand against the plastic. Alexis was barely 2 pounds. Her chest was rising and falling so fast it looked like a flutter. A nurse came by and asked Bobby if she wanted to sit down. Bobby shook her head. She wanted to keep her hand there. She wanted Alexis on the other side of the glass to know somebody was watching over her. She did the same thing for each of the other 6 every night, 1 incubator at a time, hand against the plastic, watching the smallest chest she had ever seen rise and fall. Alexis would later be diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So would Nathan. The trauma of being born so early, so small, had left its mark on the 2 of them. Some of the others had vision problems. A few had digestive issues. None of them could breathe entirely on their own at first. Every single day in that NICU was a new battle. But wait, here's where it gets crazy. Outside the hospital, the world had gone completely off the rails. Letters arrived by the thousands. Donations poured in from strangers in every state. A local builder offered to construct a custom home for the family. A car dealer donated a 15-passenger van. Companies sent diapers and formula by the truckload. President Bill Clinton himself picked up the phone and called Bobby and Kenny personally to congratulate them. The McCaughys accepted what they actually needed and politely declined the rest. They didn't want their kids growing up as a sideshow. They wanted them to grow up in a house, not on a stage. One by one over the following weeks, the babies came home. And then Bobby and Kenny found out what raising 7 newborns at the same time actually feels like. The house that love built. Here's the catch with having septuplets. The math never lets you rest. 40 diapers a day, 40-plus bottles every 24 hours. A feeding schedule taped to the refrigerator, color-coded by baby, running from 5 in the morning until well past midnight. Laundry that never ended. Sleep that came in 20-minute bursts. Bobby later said there were stretches in those first months where she genuinely lost track of what day of the week it was. The community of Carroll, Iowa, refused to let Bobby and Kenny do it alone. Volunteers from their church organized rotating shifts. Some came to feed, some came to clean, some came just to hold a baby for an hour so Bobby could close her eyes. At the peak, nearly 40 volunteers were rotating through the McCaughey home every single week. People who had never met Bobby before showed up at her door, took off their coats, and asked which baby needed what. The custom house eventually became real. A brand new home was built specifically for the family with extra bedrooms, a giant kitchen, and a basement big enough to line up 7 cribs in a row. The locals started calling it the house that love built. The name stuck. But here's where Bobby and Kenny did something remarkable. They completely refused to let their children grow up thinking they were special. The kids ate cereal at the kitchen table. They had chores. They went to public school. They got grounded when they misbehaved. They shared rooms, shared clothes, shared their parents' attention with 6 other siblings at all times. There was no celebrity treatment behind closed doors. There were no cameras following them into the bathroom. Inside the McCaughey home, they were just kids. But outside was another story. Magazines did annual photo shoots. TV specials aired on every birthday. Strangers in airports stopped the family to take pictures. People in grocery stores would point and whisper. The McCaughey kids grew up knowing they were famous before they even fully knew what fame meant. And somehow through all of it, they stayed close. Not just close as siblings, close as people. Because when you've spent every single day of your life surrounded by 6 other humans who are going through the exact same thing you're going through, you build a bond that nobody else on earth can really understand. They had their own private jokes that didn't make sense to anyone else. Their own private language at times. Their own private way of knowing when one of them was upset before anyone outside the 7 had even noticed. They moved through elementary school together, middle school together, high school together, 7 kids walking the same hallways, sitting in different classrooms, being identified constantly as one of the septuplets, the famous ones, the miracle babies. And the whole time they just wanted to be themselves. And then graduation came. And here's where the story really turns. Because the 7 of them did something nobody, not even their parents, saw coming. Graduation day, May of 2016, Carroll High School. The auditorium was packed past capacity. Family was there. Friends were there. Reporters were there. Neighbors who had been a part of this family's life since before any of these 7 kids could remember were squeezed into the back rows just to get a glimpse. The same town that had once watched 7 babies come home from the hospital was now watching 7 young adults walk across a stage. Bobby sat in the audience with Kenny. They held hands. They didn't talk. Bobby had thought about this day 1,000 times over the years. She had pictured it from the first time she was told the babies would never survive infancy, much less reach a graduation stage. Now she was here sitting in a folding chair in the high school auditorium watching it happen. Then the names started. Kenneth Robert McCaughey Jr. Alexis May McCaughey. And here's the part you have to picture, because pay attention to this part. Alexis, who had been born at barely 2 pounds, who had cerebral palsy, who had spent years in leg braces and physical therapy, just learning how to put one foot in front of the other, walked across that stage on her own. No braces, no cane, no assistance. She walked. Bobby cried in the audience. She tried not to. She failed. Natalie Sue, Kelsey, and Nathan Roy, who also has cerebral palsy, walked too. Brandon James, Joel Stephen. 7 names, 7 diplomas. 7 kids who, according to the medical literature in 1997, were not supposed to be standing on a high school stage in 2016. The crowd stood. The cheering went on for nearly 5 minutes. Cameras flashed. Bobby held on to Kenny's arm and watched her 7 impossible miracles step off the stage as high school graduates. And for a long moment, she didn't move. She just kept watching the empty stage where seconds ago all 7 of them had been standing together for what would turn out to be one of the last times. Because, as families do, the 7 of them were about to start going their separate ways.